Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn, founder of the Vagina Doc, pelvic floor physical therapist, and this morning I wanted to talk about female orgasms. The title of this video being Female Orgasms Explained. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because there's so much mystery around the female orgasm. I mean, even going through the research, it's so hard to find an article that just describes, like, says the definition, because it's kind of complex. And it's shocking of how many people don't really know if they've had one or not, or they're not comfortable talking about orgasms. Now, naturally, talking about orgasms for me is like talking about anything else because of what I do. So I don't expect you to be comfortable around this topic, at least not yet. But I really encourage you to continue to listen, because your health around intimacy can really impact, and truly, I believe it impacts all other aspects of your life, and I can attest for it. I'll tell you that story another day. So let's talk about what is an orgasm. So there are different stages of orgasm. I'm not going to get into the arousal, all of the science behind it, but let's just talk what happens when you have an orgasm. Well, the genital muscles, meaning, your pelvic floor muscles and your vaginal walls in your uterus and all those structures in there start to rhythmically contract. And that is if you've ever experienced an orgasm, it's a very, very intense experience. And I can say that it's probably the most intense experience and feeling that I personally have experienced. And I've done a lot in my life. It's just there's different types. So before I go on, let me dive into the different types. Now, you can have combination orgasms or blended orgasms, synonyms, and that is different types of orgasms blended together, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You can, as a female, you can have multiple orgasms. So men typically have one and they have a hard time having another one because of something that is part of their physiology. You can have orgasms that come from indirect stimulation, and you can think of that as a pressure orgasm, and it's not unusual for kids to have them, especially if they're belly sleepers. You can have orgasms at relaxation. So when you're like sexually stimulated and you're deeply relaxed and it's the right setting, you can have an orgasm like that. And then you can have a tension orgasm, where that is direct stimulation and your body and all the genitalia muscles are contracting, intense. Then if we go into other touch type of orgasms, that's what I'll hit next. And what we talk about most are clitoral stimulated orgasms externally, so on the outside, stimulation to the clitoris, the labia, any of that area. That's the most common external orgasm that's talked about. And then you have, I don't know how I feel about the term of Gspot orgasm, but whatever. Let's talk internally stimulated orgasms through the vagina, and then externally stimulated orgasms. So internally stimulated orgasms through the vagina, or I forgot the anus, so it can be either, is there's a couple hot spots that are high in what is called nerve receptors, sensory nerve receptors, that are associated with pleasure. And that is the front vaginal wall, where, I mean, that's what they say the Gspot is, but the clitoris, which you can see on the outside, is just a very small portion of the actual clitoris. The clitoris actually is pretty big internally. So you see on the outside, and it has a hood, like a sweatshirt hood, but inside it has these like arms, like two sets of arms that anchor the some of the muscles. It anchors the clitoris to the pelvic bone, and then helps anchor certain muscles. And it's big, very big, considering what we think it is. So I believe stimulation, what they say G-spot stimulation, is just stimulation to a different part of the clitoris. But I could be, one may argue with me there, but other internal structures that have people talk about having pretty intense orgasms are the cervix. And then let's see if what else I hear. I think cervix might be the biggest one, and then the front vaginal wall. Some might think that the front vaginal wall is, I mean, it is almost so intense that it's scary for people to let go of control, and I can attest for that completely. Like, it is so intense. And when you think of, I hate to say it, but when people think of female ejaculation, think of, I'm not even going to go there, but the question is, can a female squirt or ejaculate? And a female can ejaculate without orgasm, or a female can have an orgasm without ejaculating. And squirting. Oh, not ejaculating. Whatever words. I need to get better about talking about saying those words. But basically, the question is, well, is it pee or what is it? And there is urine, because, I mean, I think you're right near the urethra, but there are other secretions as well. And everyone's going to be different based on their biology, their physiology. Not everyone's experience is going to be the same in even with orgasms, other than, it's pretty intense if you truly have had an orgasm. So talked about internal through the vagina, and then internal through the anus is also a way to achieve orgasm. And there's ways to go about this, but basically you're stimulating the front wall of the vagina in a different way, or you're stimulating I didn't even mention the high level of sensitivity of just the area around the anus, but the way the mechanics work, and depending on how you go about it, you are stimulating very sensitive areas. So you can have an internally stimulated orgasm from the anus, and they might feel different. And the other thing is, guys, you can be in a different position, and your orgasm experience is different because of the way the muscles are positioned and how easy or hard it is for them to work depending on your story. I mean, it's super fun to pick apart the neuromuscular breakdown of an orgasm. I love it. So then you can have externally stimulated orgasms from the clitoris or elsewhere. So areas that are that have high levels of sensitivity would be the labia majora, labia minora, so the outer lips and the inner lips. And then elsewhere on your body, if you have a creative and a strong imagination, you can bring yourself to orgasm even just through your imagination. And you can find pleasure in things that have nothing to do with the vulva, the anus, or the vagina. So, just my thoughts on that. Now, why may some have difficulty achieving orgasm? Well, there's many different reasons. But, I mean, what I see most often would be lack of lubrication. So people that feel ashamed to use lube is let me just tell you, don't feel ashamed using lube, because it's good for the vaginal tissues or the lining. I mean, especially if you use a good lubrication. Now, if you're using Trojan that has a bunch of chemicals in it, then, I mean, you might feel more burning and so on with that. But if you use something that is gentle on the tassues, that's glycerin-free, water-based, or a natural oil lubricant, then it can only help for both parties. And the fact that there's shame around it is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, at first, maybe not, but like after just a little bit of time, why not? I know it breaks the mood, but it's good for your tissues, and it's less likely that their tissues are going to guard on just like the impact on, the vaginal tissues, the pelvic floor muscles. The other thing that you might have difficulty with, just the arousal and the whole sexual response, could be from hormonal imbalances. This is I get really passionate about this topic because I think there's a huge component that is being missed here, and that's around diet and meeting your energy demands. And if they're not met, say if you have disordered eating patterns, notice I didn't say eating disorder. Your main hormone system, the hypothalamic, whatever, it doesn't matter, that system is impacted, and that impacts your sex hormones. Number 3, pelvic pain. Pelvic pain, is everyone's sexual block. And it's really hard to enjoy or have pleasure if you're doubled over with cramps or other painful issues related to, endometriosis if it's active, interstitial cystitis, which is inflammation around the bladder, or some GI dysfunction, bowel dysfunction. You can also have pelvic pain from just muscles, not allowing your muscle tissues to heal, working out too quickly after having a baby, and not nurturing those tissues back to health first. So there's just a low level of inflammation and scar tissue there. So that might be impacting the motion of your nerves and the function of your muscles. And so they guard, and that's not comfortable. That blends into the next one, just your muscle dysfunction. But along the lines of muscle dysfunction is if your muscles are too stiff. Like, think about if your bicep was stuck here and you couldn't straighten it, you wouldn't be able to lift a lot. So think about if your muscles that rhythmically contract along with your vaginal lining and your clitoris, like if those muscles are too tight and they support those other muscles, it's going to be really hard for them to move in their full excursion. So your orgasms might not be intense. They might feel weak. At first they might be really intense. Everyone's experience is going to be different. And this goes for your abdominals as well. So if you're always tightening your abdominals, sometimes that helps enhance the orgasm for some. Sometimes it blocks it or impacts it. If you are like, let's say if you think you're doing Kegels, but you're really just squeezing your other muscles, like your coccygeus, which is not a part of the actual pelvic floor muscles, it's near them and attaches to the tailbone. I see people doing that all the time. And then squeezing your glutes instead of tilting your pelvis with your pelvic floor or your abdominals, sort of. It just depends. And then, so I hit 2 week, a lot of stretching can impact, like let's say if your elbow is hyperextended and then you try to pick something up, it would be harder. So if they're too long, you can experience difficulty from that. And then history of trauma, whether that's physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse. If you're not going through that healing process, that can manifest. You might not have pain with intercourse, but that control piece, let's say, and I can attest to this. So one thing that I really struggle with is letting go control. I'm afraid to let go control. So while sex isn't painful, partnered intercourse is more difficult for me. And that's not unusual by any means, but I see after doing a long journey of just personal development. And good morning, Darshana. A lot of reflection of what's going on, a lot of healing. I realized that me not letting go control is a total block. And so I'm working on it. Here's a bonus orgasm. And the reason why I bring this up is because on one of my episodes of Real Talk with the Pelvic Docs, my podcast that I host, my sister talked about how she had an orgasm with doing an abdominal exercise. And she's not the first person that I've heard said that. And I guess the slang term for that is a coregasm. So and what that means is it's still the same muscles, but it's how the nerves are stimulated. Your nerves you have nerves that are like in your junk area. I'm never saying junk again. Your perineal area, that go through your muscles externally, internally. But then you have muscles that you perceive in your pelvic floor, like in the labial area, but they connect in your abdominals. So what could be happening is as you're working your abdominals, you are feeling the intense, it's either a simultaneous contraction of the pelvic floor muscles, or it is the actual pelvic floor, or it's you perceiving that and it's your abdominals contracting. Does that make sense? So we got externally stimulated orgasms, either like directly in the perineal area or indirect elsewhere. You have imagination orgasms. You have internally stimulated orgasms through the vagina, internally stimulated orgasms through the anus, and then a combination of all of them. It's not uncommon for women to have a harder time to achieve orgasms with internal stimulation alone. And the statistics are pretty convincing, but I do think that it's intense and we're afraid. We don't know what it's supposed to feel like. So we think, oh, we're going to pee everywhere or this or that. And so leaning into the discomfort with yourself or with someone you trust is a key piece of this. And the second key piece of this, take it from me, is going through that personal journey of letting yourself go there. I mean, once I let myself go there, my life changed. That's for a different time. So I hope you got something out of this. If you're still on and you got something out of this, or at minimum Please comment replay so other people are notified that I had posted this. And then I will see you next time on Real Talk with the Vagina Doc.